All right. Yeah. So we're back. We are back to get to react to some new videos. I'm happy to be here, and yeah, man, can't wait. We're gonna be reacting to some videos. I'm just trying to see what we can find. Honestly, see if we can find some videos. Mm, hmm. Okay, we're gonna be watching this one. Countries that are way bigger than you think.
Hey, Dada, I got you right.
How you can lose the weight the way you want. Weight Loss by Hims offers access to a variety of
This video
All right, one second. That's better. That's better. And over here, put this up. There you go. Nope. Move this to the side a little bit. Alright, that's perfect. Alright, so we're going to be watching countries that have. Fuck. So we're going to be watching countries that are way bigger than you think by real life lore.
was made possible by
God damn, it's kind of loud.
CuriosityStream. When you sign up at CuriosityStream, life wrong, and most people's perception of the actual size of countries across the world are wrong. And most of the reason is because we're used to seeing this world map all the time, like literally all the time. Google Maps, Apple Maps, and classrooms all across the world use this map, and it's not entirely representative of the true size of actual countries. I already made a whole video nearly 4 years ago explaining why and how this map distorts the shape of countries, but there's a lot of things that I didn't mention back in that video, so consider this one a long overdue part 2. So let's get started first with islands. I think it's fascinating to look at an actual size comparison side by side of the world's 15 largest islands, which in order are Greenland, New Guinea, Borneo, Madagascar, Baffin, Sumatra, Honshu, Victoria, Great Britain,
so many
Ellesmere,
islands.
Sulawesi, the South Island of New Zealand, Java, the North Island of New Zealand, and Newfoundland. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack here. First off, let's look at the populations on all of these islands. Some of them, like Baffin, Victoria, and Ellesmere, despite being huge, are almost uninhabited, while Java, Honshu, and Great Britain are all incredibly crowded in comparison. The relatively small island of Java has more people living on it than the entire population of Russia, but
What the fuck? Where is this small island that has more people living on it than Russia? I've never even heard about this country. I've heard Java for like coding, but not for as a nation. Why don't we know about this island then?
their size differences, well, pretty drastic. Great
Oh.
Britain is a lot smaller than both the islands of New Zealand when they're combined, despite Great Britain being home to over 60 million people and New
60
Zealand
million
not
people live
even
there.
being home to 5 million. But that's nothing when compared to Japan. New Zealand is roughly the same size, but Japan is home to almost 127 million
God
people,
damn.
25 times more than the number of people in New Zealand. And Japan
Shit.
itself is pretty huge. Here's what it looks like just off the east coast of the United States, where you can see that it stretches from Maine all the way down to Cuba. Or for a European perspective, Japan stretches from St. Petersburg in the north to below Sardinia in the south. But Japan is actually quite small when compared to the size of Indonesia, which will probably be bigger than you thought. For starters, here is Indonesia's actual size
That's
placed
Indonesia?
over the United States.
Yo, that is fucking massive. Indonesia has a lot of land. It's bigger than the entire state of New York. Fucking bigger than Florida. Oh my god. It actually covers a lot of the space that I thought for Indonesia. It has a lot of small islands too, but still, like the small islands can be an entire city. I'm actually mind blown right now. Holy shit! I'm looking at it. I'm like, shit.
And the distance from one side over to the other is actually greater than the distance across the entire continental
longer than
US.
the US.
And for a European perspective, the distance across Indonesia is greater than the distance of Ireland from Uzbekistan.
God damn.
Or for another perspective, here is Indonesia when compared to Russia. Indonesia is really, really big. But there's other weird, unexpected island geographies out there too.
If all these mountains, no, if all these countries are like that, then why do we have our map looking a different way? It doesn't make sense.
For example, let's take the Republic of Ireland and South Korea. You may think that finding a similarity between them would be really difficult, but you might change your mind when we overlap their borders.
Hold on. My stream just go off? No, I'm live. But why is my frame so fucking ass? Hold on, why are my frames so ass? So now they're better, but what happened to my kick? My kick stream says I went offline. Now it's back to being good. I have no idea what happened.
With one another. Ireland and South Korea have change your mind when we overlap their borders with one another. Ireland and South Korea have very similar shapes and sizes,
Oh, wow.
despite Ireland having a population of only 4.8 million and South Korea having a population of over 51
God
million.
damn.
So while they may be similar in size, they aren't in name. Two places that are, though, are Georgia and Georgia. Georgia the state is more than twice as big as Georgia the country, and with almost 3 times the population as well. With that in mind, I think if Georgia ever got into a fight with Georgia, I think that Georgia would most likely win out. Now, in my last video, I talked about how much bigger Africa is than most people seem to think it is, but I didn't talk about individual African countries and their sizes. Somalia immediately jumps to mind first because, well, it's
Somalia.
really big. Placed over the US in actual size, Somalia stretches up from Detroit in the north down to
Oh my
Florida in
God.
the south and spans basically the entire East Coast.
Dude, so you can... Fucking hell. Then why does Africa look so small on the map compared to US? Somalia is pretty much the entire fucking East Coast of America. But at the same time, we don't really. But at the same time, I feel like Somalia is a very underdeveloped country from my knowledge. I don't think I've seen a lot of Somalia progressing either. That's fucking insane, dude.
For the European perspective, Somalia stretches from London through Germany and France before finally hitting Valencia in Spain. But
God.
there are other big African countries too. Kenya is almost the same size as Texas in the
Kenya.
United States, or weirdly similar in shape to the old borders of the Holy Roman Empire when placed over Europe. But none of these compare to the Jupiter of Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which really is massive in every sense of the word. Placed over America, the DRC stretches from Miami in the
Holy
south,
shit.
juts out past Dallas in the west, and all the way up above Chicago and getting even into Canada up in the north.
So you can fucking have. So Africa is pretty much quadruple the size of the entirety of America by land alone. So the deserts are way bigger than we thought. That also kind of nice because that means that we have a lot more space to build stuff than we think. But because of the map that we were given, we think that America is bigger than most other continents, which is just plain out wrong. That's crazy.
Placed over Europe instead, the DRC stretches from the south of Greece to Spain in the west and up to Belarus, Lithuania, and Denmark up in the north. The
Look at that. That's most European countries with just one country of the Congo. Just one country is pretty much the majority of Europe.
DRC in Africa alone takes up a significant part of an entire continent in land area.
I lost a lot of weight recently, and none of my clothes fit right anymore. But my Stitch Fix stylist, Stephanie, she nailed it.
But we're still not done. Next up, we have to spend some time talking about Chile. Chile is, well, it's long. Very long. So long, in fact, if you flipped it on its side, you could nearly span the entire
God.
length of the US-Canadian border with it. And if you moved it over a bit, you could also span the entire Atlantic Ocean from Canada to Paris. If you
Damn.
placed Chile back to normal, but kept it in Europe, it would stretch from the top of the continent in Norway all the way down beneath Crete and near Libya in the south. Chile is, therefore, taller than Europe is, an entire continent, which is kind of one of the main points that I'm trying to make in this video. Europe is a lot smaller than most people think it is. Traveling across Europe can take you through multiple languages and cultures in a short amount of time, which can give the illusion of a bigger size. But don't be fooled. To put into perspective just how much bigger the lands were that European empires went out and conquered and subjugated in the centuries past, here's a few examples. The Indian subcontinent, once ruled entirely by Britain, is almost as big as Europe is itself, and takes up almost every country west of Ukraine and Romania. And that wasn't even the only massive British possession. Let's take Australia, a genuine continent in its own right that pretty much does.
Dude, Australia looks so small on the map, but if you put the entirety of Australia over Europe, you have so much more land. Like, if you look at this shit, if you look at this map, like there's, if you look at this map, like there's like many bodies of water that are included in this map. Like you have the rivers right here, the Mediterranean and the Pacific Ocean over the top, which is just land in Australia. They just have that much more nature. They just have that much more land than we think.
Does cover all of Europe from Portugal to Moscow, and from Turkey to the Norwegian Sea. The continental US over Europe too is basically also the same size as the continent, stretching from Portugal in the west to a little beyond Moscow in the east. But we're not done yet making Europe feel like a tiny place. Let's take Brazil next, which, like the others before this,
Oh my God, look
basically
at Brazil.
spans most of the entire continent as well.
Dude, Brazil is fucking humongous. Look at that. It is the entirety of Europe. And a big and not only that, it's also a big chunk of Russia and a little bit of Africa if you put it down there. Holy shit, dude. Brazil is massive. South America is bigger than you think too. then why do we make... So if we know this, then why do we still use the map that makes Europe and like the United States look bigger than it actually is?
Seriously, just stop and look at this for a moment. You can fit practically all of Europe inside of Brazil, and it was ruled for centuries by just this tiny little nub here at the end. And this is why Brazilian Portuguese is more widespread than Portuguese Portuguese. Anyway, none of these really compare to what in my opinion is the biggest shocker in this list, which
Oh my God,
is
how big
China.
is China?
When placed over Europe, China's gargantuan size is truly understood
Oh
by
my
most of us
God.
in the West for the first time. China pretty much is the size of Europe, except it's all ruled by a single government, its population is roughly double the size, and it's over 91% made up by the same cultural and ethnic group. In short, from a European/Western perspective, the world is sometimes shown to us from our point of view, which makes our countries or our continents seem much bigger than they actually are. The fact is, the world is a huge place, and the West is just a small part of it. If you want to go on from here and learn more things about our planet that will blow your mind, CuriosityStream has a fantastic short documentary on the lost 8th continent of our planet that was only recently discovered, Zealandia. There's plenty in there you'll
Dude, that kind of just tripped me out. There's so much land, but that also makes it like very understandable how like Germany was able to take over many other countries in World War II, because they're actually pretty small. They're not as big as we thought. But if you want to take over fucking, I don't know, Brazil, dude, you had to cover a lot of land with troops. And by a lot, I mean a shit ton. Same thing with Australia. There's so much. No wonder that there's many no wonder that there's many like parts of Brazil in the Amazon forest that is still unexplored. Because that thing is massive. Alright, besides that, great video, man. I loved it. Let's see what we got. This is interesting.
Looks like trouble in paradise as the hottest festival of the year has flamed out.
You wanted to attend.
Alright. Alright, so we're going to be reacting to the invisible barrier. So we're going to be reacting to the. So we're going to be looking at the invisible barrier keeping two worlds apart by PBS Eons. Alright, let's see what this is about.
In between two of the islands of Indonesia, there's an ancient line that is both real and not real. You can't see it, but it's there all the same. If you stood on the coast of Bali and looked east to the shores of Lombok, you'd be staring right at the line's narrowest point, a 32-kilometer stretch of water that seems pretty unassuming. This invisible barrier weaves its way through the entire Malay archipelago, the largest collection of islands on the planet. See, on the western side, the animal life is characteristic of Asia, featuring rhinos, elephants, tigers, and woodpeckers, to name a few. But cross the line, and things suddenly change. You won't find those same species on the eastern side. Instead, the islands have a totally different cast of ecological characters, including marsupials, Komodo dragons, cockatoos, and honey-eaters. This is what scientists call a biogeographic boundary, the meeting point of two regions of biodiversity that are highly distinct. And this particular line, called the Wallace Line, is perhaps the sharpest and most iconic of all. So how did this invisible line come to be? Why does it shape the distribution of so many species? How did we figure out the path it takes? And how could it be both real and imaginary?
I don't know.
The Wallace Line was first sketched out in 1859 by a guy named, wait for it, Wallace. Alfred Russel Wallace, to be exact, a British naturalist who you might have also heard of as the co-discoverer of natural selection. That concept came to Wallace in a literal fever dream as he lay bedridden with malaria during part of his 8-year trip around the Malay archipelago. And while it ended up being overshadowed by Darwin on that front, the second best idea he had on that trip was the existence of the Wallace Line. I mean, you know, 2 good ideas in one trip. This idea helped to forever establish him as the father of biogeography, the study of the distribution of living things. He had spent his voyage observing and collecting as many species as he could, hopping from island to island across almost the entire archipelago. And it was as he moved east from Bali to Lombok that he first noticed something intriguing. Even though the islands were separated only by a narrow strait, the change in animal life wasn't gradual and subtle. It was sudden and distinct. Wallace saw the differences in animal life between the two as being even more striking than between England and Japan. It was birds that initially caught his attention. Certain species that were plentiful on Java and Bali, like the yellow-headed weaver, coppersmith barbet, and the Javanese three-toed woodpecker, didn't exist at all on Lombok. And this abrupt shift extended to mammals and even many insects too, almost as if an invisible barrier was separating 2 different worlds. But why?
How do the birds know where to go? In the sense that they could just fly over to the other side at any time, but why don't they do that? Is there like a big change in temperature from one island to the other? I'm actually very curious because I don't know how they feel. No. I'm actually very curious because I don't know how they can tell which island they're on.
And how? The biogeographic line that he drew, which others would tweak in later years, didn't just reflect the proximity of the islands. In fact, some islands on opposing sides of the line are closer to each other than many islands on the same sides are to one another. So Wallace realized that other more mysterious forces must be in play, like, say, geology. He recognized that the geological past shapes the biological present. And because the distribution of living species today partly reflects ancient geological events, he saw biogeography as a way to uncover epic chapters of the planet's history that might otherwise have been unknowable. These concepts are easy to take for granted today. We talk about them all the time here on Eons. But they were still fairly new ideas in Wallace's day. And by taking this perspective, he concluded that the Western Islands must have once all been connected to each other, and to the Asian mainland. While today they're surrounded by shallow seas, this is only the result of a geologically recent rise in sea levels. How else could the big animals of that side, like tigers and rhinos and tapirs, have ended up on the islands? Because they're now separated by expanses of water that are way too wide for those species to cross. He had a similar thought about how the islands east of Java and Borneo had formed. At least some of them were the remnants of a former Australian continent. Wallace had a hunch that, throughout all of that change, deeper waters with strong currents between the 2 regions must have prevented many species from crossing from continent to continent when sea levels were lower. And this is still preventing many species from crossing today when sea levels are higher and the continents are fragmented into neighboring groups of islands. Even many flying bird and insect species obey the line, ones that aren't capable of crossing those stretches of open ocean. Wallace had pulled together many pieces of the puzzle, but he and other scientists at the time were missing.
It's not that they don't want to, it's just that they can't because the winds are too strong. That makes sense though.
One key idea to complete the picture: plate tectonics. The surface of the planet is not static, of course, it's dynamic. It's made up of individual large sections or plates that move and collide over vast stretches of geologic time. It's yet another concept that's easy for us to take for granted, but which is actually a relatively recent addition to our understanding of the world. In fact, plate tectonics only became widely accepted in the late 1960s, more than half a century after Wallace's death, and also around the time when I was born.
I'm Stephanie, actor and Walmart Plus member. I get to choose my video streaming service at no extra cost. Who knew?
Which means I'm
Old.
as old as plate tectonics. We now know that plate tectonics shapes our planet in many ways, including forming and deforming continents, raising up island chains, and building mountain ranges. And studies have shown the Malay Archipelago to be one of the most complex tectonic regions in the world, a meeting point of multiple plates all jostling for space. And this is responsible for not only the area's many volcanoes and frequent seismic activity, but also the peculiar contrasts of its animal life. Because by the 1980s, scientists were able to say with confidence that the Wallace Line is, at its core, a result of plate tectonics. Wallace had correctly identified that two former continuous landmasses had existed on either side of this line in the deep past. Today we know them as the paleocontinents of Sunda in the west and Sahul in the east,
Sunda,
both of which
Sahul.
existed during the ice ages when more water was locked up in ice and sea levels were lower. Wallace didn't know it, but while they're pretty close now, the two partly sunken continents used to be much, much further apart. The Sahul continent of the eastern side of the line encompassed Australia, Tasmania, New Guinea, and the Aru Islands. And it only approached the Asian Sunda continental shelf in the west around 20 to 25 million years ago in the late Oligocene or early Miocene epoch. This was a result of the Australian plate slowly drifting north over tens of millions of years after breaking away from Antarctica in the south, bringing its distinctive community of birds, reptiles, and marsupials with it. So even though the species of each side are neighbors now, they've been evolving separately for eons, their two worlds only colliding fairly recently in evolutionary terms. And in between them, immediately east of the line, a complex force of plate tectonics created a chain of new islands in an area of the archipelago that's now called Wallacea. These oceanic islands differ from the continental islands that flank them in that they were never connected to either of the greater landmasses. They were ecological blank slates, waiting to be filled in with whatever creatures could make it there. And those ended up being mostly species from the Australian side, seeing as the Wallace Line acted as a barrier to Asian species moving east. Take, for instance, the...
I can kind of imagine the birds like being able to fly to the whole side. Sorry. I can kind of imagine birds being able to fly to those sides of the island, but for land animals, let's say, I don't know, like this Komodo dragon. How the fuck did you get there?
Komodo dragon,
Were you
a
always
giant
there?
monitor lizard that today lives on a handful of islands in eastern Indonesia. Their fossils first appear in mainland Australia more than 3 million years ago in the Pliocene epoch, only reaching their current Indonesian island home in the Wallacea region around 1 million years ago. And even now, the deep waters with strong currents that weave between the two regions, including the strait between Lombok and Bali, still limit the dispersal of many species across the line, keeping the differences in their evolutionary history so strikingly visible. This is what created the stark contrast bisecting the jumble of islands that Wallace first sketched out in 1859, and that still fascinates biogeographers today. Wallace's invisible line may not be real in a physical sense, but it shows just how loudly ancient geological events can echo through time, and how they shape the diversity and distribution of life in strange and contrasting ways. And while Darwin might get virtually all the credit as the guy who figured out how species came to be, Wallace is still recognized as a pioneer in figuring out how species came to be where they are.
That's nice.
So plate tectonics also explains why Earth has supercontinents. You can celebrate this fact with our Saga of the Supercontinents poster that features 4 of these continental configurations. Available now at dftba.com.
Alright, honestly, that was an amazing video, but I still kind of find it hard to believe how land is able to move that much. I know it does take time, and we say that it takes $1 million. I know it takes time, and people say that it takes like millions of years, but it's also, for me, just kind of hard to imagine just so much weight being moved all together. I don't know. I just find it so crazy that it actually happens, and how much power an earthquake has that's able to move entire masses of land. But yeah, man, amazing video, and I also hope that one day I'm able to visit that island. It sounds cool. Alright. Next video. Alright, let's see. Hold up. What's the bathroom? All right. All right. This one looks interesting.
I checked Allstate first and saved hundreds on my car insurance. Unfortunately, I didn't check if I unlatched Bevo's gate while taking a selfie.
Bevo, no! Come back!
Whoa, 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 whoa. At least I checked Allstate first and saved hundreds.
Febreze. When you host, your
No,
bathroom
what's your
can
fucking
feel like a
hat?
revolving door. Keep things fresh with Febreze Bathroom. It's an outlet-free air freshener that
Nigga, I
fights
don't want
odors for
pink
45 days. So even after every flush, you know your bathroom smells amazing.
For years.
All right. What the fuck's that? Fuck it. That works, I guess. No, that's not working. There you go. That's better. Can't wait to get my green screen, bro. Right.
We thought the Megalodon was just a...
Alright. So we're gonna be watching the Megalodon was worse than that. So we're gonna be watching the Megalodon was worse than experts ever imagined by Brightside.
For years, we've thought the Megalodon was just a big shark, which is scary enough. After
Kinda
all,
is.
it could have eaten a creature the size of a whale in just 5 bites.
5 bites.
Estimates
Entire whale.
indicate that the largest shark that ever lived had been around 59 feet long, which is a
59 feet
reasonable
long.
size and explains a lot. But the scientific community was wrong. Very wrong. Now, scientists have proven that megalodons could grow up to 80 feet long, which is the
80
same
feet.
as a 6-story building. The creature would have certainly been dozens of times bigger than you if you had seen it underwater. These giants ruled the ancient oceans between about 20 million and 3 million years ago. And even though it was a long time ago, they've left a lasting impression, becoming the protagonists of many movies. And scientists continue to search for answers about their life. Thanks to this, we still occasionally find their fossils. But the thing is,
Yo, I find that scary that there's probably... I find it scary there's probably thousands of fossils that are just stuck underwater and we just... I find it crazy that there's probably thousands of... No. I find it crazy that there's probably a... Why can't I fucking talk, dude? I feel like I just keep like shutting down. I can't talk. I feel like there's like... I feel like there's thousands of fossils that are just stuck in the water and we just can never get to them because we don't have the technology to go all the way down there and actually look for these skeletons. So I feel like there's a lot of life that we just never seen before. And it's just because we can't really retrieve those bones.
no one has ever found a complete skeleton. All we have are scattered vertebrae, a few scales, and, of course, those massive, razor-sharp teeth. The most complete piece we know of is a 36-foot section of a megalodon's spine. It was once part of the trunk of the animal's body. So, to assess just how big the megalodon was, experts compared its fossils to more than 150 species of sharks, both those that are alive and those that have gone extinct, to get the most realistic result possible. If the Megalodon had had the proportions of a regular shark, it would have had a 6-foot head and a 12-foot tail. It would have also stretched 54 feet from nose to fin. But these measurements are way off the mark. The largest Megalodon vertebra ever found is 9 inches in diameter, which makes it 3 inches larger than the largest vertebra of a typical shark. And if we follow these proportions, that Megalodon was a whopping 80 feet long. To better understand how giant this is, just think of 2 school buses lined up end to end. For a long time, it was very common to think that the Megalodon was just a giant great white shark. And it makes sense, right? I mean, both would have had large, terrifying, serrated teeth. But that was another completely wrong idea. Now, we know that Megalodons were actually much more slender and aerodynamic than the modern great white shark. Their body shape was built to cut through the water with much less resistance, minimizing the effects of gravity in the sea, letting them glide effortlessly through the ocean.
Dude, so they were fucking fast as shit.
If Megalodon wasn't just another great white shark, what other animal of this...
Dude, they probably took so much energy for them to actually eat something.
Same species was it most similar to? Surprise! In fact, it had more in common with the modern lemon shark. This species has robust and powerful bodies, 2 large dorsal fins, and blunt snouts, which makes them really fast and agile hunters, like prehistoric predators. In other words, while thinking about the Megalodon, you can imagine a giant, turbocharged lemon shark. This is the most modern comparison of the Megalodon with another animal, unless scientists find a complete skeleton of the ancient shark. But it's not common to find complete shark skeletons. They're rare because they're actually made not of bone, but of soft, coated cartilage, like the stuff in human noses and ears. Their teeth are the boniest part of their bodies, and it's the reason why we've found so many of them.
Have you ever wanted to see your home from space?
No.
With this free satellite Earth Maps tool, you can zoom right down.
Yet, a complete skeleton is like scattered puzzle pieces to us. There's no solid bone to hold these pieces together, so the whole thing is very vulnerable to falling apart.
I mean, that makes sense. That's probably why we don't really find entire bodies of sea creatures. But also finding creatures there's definitely some type of animal that has been enormous that we have not found, probably because the bones have just fallen apart in the water or just being carried away apart or have been just torn apart by the water currents, so they're just kind of scattered all over the ocean. Some massive creature that's probably living down there to this day.
Still, it's actually possible for an entire shark skeleton to survive. In these cases, very specific natural phenomenon have to come into play. The skeleton needs to get buried super fast in mud or sediment, free of any kind of scavengers and away from ocean currents. Otherwise, it simply disintegrates before it can fossilize. Interestingly, although the sea is the home of these animals, it is possible to find their skeletons on land too. Millions of years ago, a big portion of today's dry land was submerged, teeming with marine life. Then, in certain places, sedimentary minerals and specific biological conditions of the seabed allowed the fossilization of sharks in marine rocks. Today, those are desert rocks that ensure the preservation of shark fossils. But in any case, searching for a shark tooth in a desert is like looking for a needle in a haystack. But finding an entire fossilized skeleton embedded in a rock is like hitting the jackpot. Another unexpected discovery is that...
Dude, how much can you get paid from finding a fossil? Do you even get paid if you find like a unknown creature's fossil? I mean, I think I think it would be pretty cool that you will be able to probably name it after you. Because that's what most people fucking do if they're a scientist. They just name something after themselves just because they want people to know that it's their discovery. But how much money can they actually bring you discovering one of these things?
These prehistoric sharks were not born small and cute like regular baby sharks. A newborn megalodon could reach almost 13 feet in length.
13 feet,
That's
goddamn.
more than twice the height of the average human. Imagine a shark the size of a boat from the moment it's born. Now, although we don't have all the information about the giant of the seas, it's a fact that it's one of the most famous animals in pop culture worldwide.
Jaws.
Not only has it inspired several movies, but some people also insist that the megalodon is still alive. Scientists say it's not. The megalodon didn't survive the test of time, and it would be impossible for such a giant creature to dwell in the seas without us noticing it. First, it was a super predator. It hunted whales, dolphins, and other large marine animals. If the Meg was still around, its presence would completely change the balance in the oceans. It would have huge impacts on marine ecosystems, regulating populations and influencing the size and behavior of the ancient shark's prey. A good example is whales. They wouldn't have grown so big if the Meg still hunted in the oceans. This only happened because there was no super predator in the way. If the giant shark was still in our oceans, species like the blue whale would be tiny, as they would need to develop and adapt to be able to escape constant attacks. The lives of the workers of the sea would also be completely different. Fishers would have to avoid certain areas, ships would change routes, and even maritime tourism would be risky. Going for a swim and coming across a shark over 65 feet long? Not worth the risk.
Definitely fucking not.
Plus, if the megalodon was still out there, we would have some proof. Commercial fishing catches millions of sharks every year, and a monster of this size would not go unnoticed. Not to mention that with all of today's technology such as drones, satellites, and submarines at our disposal, someone would have already recorded an encounter with this living legend. By the way, most sharks, like most fish, are cold-blooded. But the reality for Megalodon was different. This giant was able to keep its body warmer than the surrounding ocean. This gave it an advantage over other sea creatures, allowing it to remain fast and active even in colder waters. It was a survival advantage that other animals of its kind did not acquire during their evolution. One of the most famous theories is that the Meg lives in the Mariana Trench. But
dude, the Megalodon was too OP for it to be alive today. The Megalodon was way too OP to be alive today. It would have truly changed our oceans. But also, I think I've heard of this one like big fish that was heard like many years ago. I think the blop or something like that, bloop, blop, whatever the fish is. It's just a huge noise that was being able to be recorded hundreds of thousands of miles. No, like hundreds of miles off the shore. And people heard them. I don't know whatever happened to that, if they ever found it, but it is one of the biggest mysteries to this day.
scientists are sure that it doesn't make any sense. This region is poor in food and has many tiny creatures, which would not be nearly enough to sustain a large predator. In addition, there's a lot of research studying countless sharks that live in the ocean depths, and none of them come close to the size of the Megalodon. So, does the Megalodon still exist? Definitely not, but that doesn't mean it isn't any less mysterious and fascinating.
Dude. It's kind of hard to imagine that there was a fish back then that was able to eat an entire whale in just a few bites. Because whales are pretty fucking massive. They're the size of entire school buses, and they weigh probably triple the amount of weight. So that is kind of bizarre to think about. But also, we had like very, very large land creatures too that you wouldn't imagine that they're alive. That you wouldn't. We have very large land creatures that used to exist, the dinosaur times, that you wouldn't think were possible, but they were. So, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But I don't know, I just think it's fascinating that we had those type of sea creatures back in the day. But yeah. Alright. Stop recording that. And now, god, I can't wait for FIFA to come out so I can actually start like playing the game after streaming. Because right now I don't want to play any game at all. And also I don't have money to play any game. So I would like to have some game to play afterwards. And that is going to be FIFA as soon as it comes out. Which is in just 2 more days. So that's good.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is base.
Here are the...
Alright, this is our last one. Alright, so we're going to be watching disturbing mythical creatures you've never heard of.
Here are the most terrifying mythical creatures to ever exist. Or not exist, hopefully.
Not exist.
The Manananggal is a monster originating from the Philippines, and its name roughly translates to one who separates itself. It's a fearsome and disgusting creature, usually resembling a disfigured old woman at first. Its name comes from its unpleasant habit of fully detaching its torso from its lower body, entrails hanging out all over the place, and then sprouting enormous bat wings and just flying away into the night to hunt for food. What food, you ask? Well, during the hours of darkness, it will use its long proboscis-like tongue to suck blood from its human victims, specifically targeting newlyweds, lovers, newborn children, and grooms who were abandoned before marriage. And it's even known to
if you get fucked over, you're pretty much a target for this creature. That's sad. And they targeted them specifically.
Extract fetuses from the bodies of pregnant women. What, you thought I was going to draw that, you desensitized freak? Nah, here's a kitten instead. While it's hunting, the Manananggal makes a sort of tick-tick-ticking sound, and the farther away the sound seems to be, the closer the creature actually is, in order to confuse its victims.
Oh, damn.
During its nightly hunt, the creature's lower half is just left standing somewhere, and this tiny design flaw is its one weakness. If you want to kill the Manananggal, and let's face it, you probably do, you need to prevent the horrifying upper half from reuniting with its butt. I recommend burning the thing, but you can also use salt, ash, or even garlic to ward off the torso, kind of like a vampire. If the better half of the Manananggal hasn't rejoined its severed ass by daybreak, it is believed to die, thank goodness. Despite the world getting more modern by the day, sightings of these creatures continue to be reported, especially in the Visayan regions of the Philippines. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, or you might just get a visit from one of these gals tonight. Don't say I didn't warn you, cause I just did. If you thought—
Do people claim that they have seen this creature in real life? That's just so bizarre to think about, because how do they know of a... No, that's so fucking weird that they have like a way to defeat it without ever seeing one. Who came up with that? Why is that one thing their fucking weakness?
That was awful, hold on to your knives and torches, because the Manananggal is actually the least scary creature in this whole video, and things are about to get weird.
Okay. The Deadly Whistler.
The Deadly Whistler, also called El Sibon, is different from the other creatures on this list, and his story is something of a cautionary tale. Originally, this creature was an ordinary boy, and he was a spoiled brat who always got everything he wished for. One day, he told his father to go out and hunt a deer, his favorite meat, to eat for dinner. His father did not return with a deer. In fact, he returned from the hunt with nothing at all. And so the boy killed his father and cut out his organs, which he gave to his mother and said, "Father has brought us some meat for dinner." Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
The boy's mother cooked the meat, but quickly realized what had happened. The part of the story that I've just told you greatly varies between tellings, but the next part is always the same. The boy's family ties him to a post and whips him, and cleans his wounds with alcohol, chili peppers, and lemon juice. Ouch. They give him a sack of his father's remains, which they curse him to carry for eternity. Then 2 rabid, starving dogs are released upon him. The skeletal creature that came out of this terrible circumstance would be called El Sibon, or the Deadly Whistler, standing at about 6 meters tall and creaking about the treetops with its bag of bones. If you hear El Sibon whistling from nearby, it means you are in no danger, but if the whistling sounds distant, it means that your death is closer than you think. It's said that the Whistler can appear by your house on certain nights and drop his sack to the ground to count the bones within, one by one. If someone in the house hears the Whistler outside, nothing bad will happen. However, if he spends the night counting unnoticed until dawn, someone in the house will die, and their bones will be added to the bag. If you like this video so far, please don't forget.
Dude, that's kind of creepy as shit. El Sibon has been carrying that bag of bones to this day. So he's kind of carrying his shame. That's kind of creepy as hell.
The Naklavi is a sea creature demon coming from Orcadian folklore, from the islands of Orkney. No tail.
I think we all know what this guy kind of looks like. And it is very similar to a very famous anime, Attack on Titan.
Tails describe what it looks like when it's dwelling down in the depths, but an islander named Tamas claimed to have an encounter with the thing and described its on-land appearance in impressive detail. According to Tamas, the Naklavi has a man's torso attached to the body of a horse as if it were a rider, except the torso has no legs. It's just fused with the equine's back. The man's long arms can reach the ground from where he sits, and atop its shoulders is an enormous head up to 3 feet in diameter. Oh, I forgot to mention that the Naklavi has no skin, with black blood pulsating through yellow veins. The horse's head has an enormous gaping mouth that exudes toxic vapors, and one single eye burning like a red flame. The creature's breath was thought to wilt crops, sicken livestock, and cause epidemics. In 1722, one of the islands of Orkney began the practice of burning seaweed for a number of boring reasons, including making soap and glass and improving soil for farming. The point is, the pungent smoke emitted by doing this is believed to have enraged the Naklavi and made it go on a wild rampage, causing plagues, destroying crops, and killing cattle and horses. This disaster seemed to spread to all of the islands in the business of burning seaweed. It's said that, like many sea-dwelling mythical creatures, the Naklavi can't cross borders of fresh water, so if you're ever being chased by it, just jump across a creek or something and hope for the best.
Dude, just imagine if this creature was actually real. It would look so fucking creepy. And I feel like a bunch of people would just get arms. No, I feel like a bunch of people would just get like rifles and go hunt this thing and just start shooting it down if they ever do find it.
Up next on the list of disturbing mythical creatures is the
Tepoztli.
The Aztec civilization believed that before there was anything, there were these 4 god dudes named these lovely names, which I can pronounce. I just don't feel like it right now.
Yeah,
using their godly powers, as gods do, these guys created the water, some more gods, and most importantly, Tepoztli, a sea monster existing on the cosmic scale that had an insatiable appetite for everything it could get its mouths on. This creature was so hungry all the time that every joint on its body possessed a different mouth. Elbow mouths, knee mouths, knuckle mouths, you name it. This begs the question, if each joint has a mouth, and mouths themselves have joints, you know, for jaws and stuff, did the creature's mouths have mouths? And did those mouths have more mouths, and so on? Anyhow, as the gods continued on with the creation of everything, they realized they had a problem. Everything they made would just fall into the ocean and get eaten by Cipactli. So, being gods, they decided they should probably do something about this. But it wasn't as easy as just snapping their fingers and fixing the whole thing. Cipactli was so powerful, so enormous, and so hungry that it took all 4 of the original gods to take him down, and one of them lost a foot in the process. Eventually, though, they did manage to kill him by separating his body into 4 sections, one for each compass direction. Using Cipactli's body, they created the entire world. The creature's head became the 13 heavens, its midsection was crafted into the earth, and its tail became the underworld. The last mythical creature on this list is by far the scariest of all.
Big ass animal. So right now we're holy shit, this picture. Anyways, so right now what we're walking on is just a big ass dragon that was eating everything. It's a cool story from the Aztecs. I don't know who came up with it, but they will have to check their facts, because I don't know if that is true, but I mean, it's a cool story to tell a kid. They'll probably believe it.
If you've heard of it, you know all too well that the people who believe in it are afraid to even utter its name. This is, of course, the
Skinwalker.
The stories of skinwalkers originate from Navajo culture, an indigenous people of the southwestern United States. You've probably seen memes and videos all over the internet of creepy animals and dudes in spooky costumes hiding in the trees with captions like, "Guys, I found a skinwalker, ah!" But these could not be further from the reality of these creatures. In Navajo culture, there are people that practice medicine and types of magic for the benefit of the community, as healers or medicine men. They may learn about both good and evil magic for the purpose of protecting against evil. Witches are essentially the opposite of these healers, their dark reflection, if you will. Oftentimes they start out as medicine men, but they use their knowledge of evil magic to hurt others, and they use the corpses of humans to do their work. They make their tools from human bones, and use parts of the body to make potions which they use to kill or hurt others.
What kind of potion can you make with human remains? I can't even think of one single thing that would be useful in the body. And where do they even get the spells? They just kind of like create it themselves and then just call it a spell? Or how do they know it actually works? They just think that it does?
To become a skinwalker, a witch must kill a close family member, preferably a sibling. This gives them the ability to shapeshift into different animals, usually predatory animals like bears, coyotes, and wolves, but they can assume the shape of any creature. They choose their shape based on the abilities they need to do their evil work, such as claws, stealth, speed, or strength. When in human form, the skinwalker wears the skin of the animal they transform into, and their eyes look like those of that animal. And when in animal form, their eyes look human. By day, these witches walk among the humans of their tribe unnoticed, but at night, they transform to cause illness, death, and destruction wherever they go. They can even read minds and control their victims to do their bidding, and they're often blamed for causing all manner of mysterious mischief and trouble. My channel is still small enough that I can pretty easily read every comment I get, so let me know, which of these horrifying mythical creatures do you think was truly the most disturbing? And
I feel like the Skinwalker is just more popularly known. And I didn't know of their origins, to be honest with you. So I think the Skinwalker would be by far the scariest compared to every other one that just sounds... Compared to every other one that just kind of sounds... just way too mythical to even be considered real. But the Skinwalker, it's also a myth, of course, but it just sounds more believable than the rest, in a way. I don't know how the whole shape-shifting works, but then again, Actually, now the more I think about it, it does kind of sound. Actually, the more I think about it, it does sound kind of dumb. But then again, it is a myth, so you can just kind of make everything up that you want, and then if people believe it, now it's a myth. So yeah, that's kind of cool. But if you were a skinwalker, what animal would you want to become? I say, shit, I say I would like to become a rabbit. Just for the one time. So I can kind of run really fast. I'm not thinking about like very big animals because I don't want to be an elephant. Because then again, it can only kind of transform to like the environmental animals. So I think a rabbit would be pretty cool to be. But yeah. Besides that, amazing video. I loved it. I'm done with the stream. I have quite a beard going on right now. But anyways. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I have to edit all of these videos now. I'll see you guys next time.